Hi, welcome to Speakeasy. I'm Hayley.
And I'm Jenny.
And today we're going to talk about working with sponsors, commercial content, whether it's solo presentations, speakers on sponsors on a panel, or just generally how to get the most out of that relationship.
Yeah. I think I mentioned this a few times. So how I started out in events was actually, well, it wasn't events, but in this space was in sales.
Yeah.
So I think that really, in a way, it really helped me. One, made me realize I don't really want to do sales, but it gave me a sort of a commercial mindset, to be honest, to everything I was doing. I was very aware of the importance of sales, of the importance of the sponsors, and of really keeping that kind of like customer management phase sort of thing. Which, I mean, now you're seeing more the role of customer success, but not every company's got that. And in fact, a lot of times it's basically us.
Yeah.
Producers become the customer success managers because, sales get them in, and sales are constantly just thinking about the new sponsor coming on board. But once they're on board, it's on us to speak to them and to interact with the sponsors.
Yeah.
And really that relationship, to be honest, if the sponsors really like you, chances are they will come back next year.
Yeah.
If they didn't really like working with you, it's going to be a challenge for the sponsorship team to get them back on board.
Absolutely.
And I think, well, like we were talking about admin in other episodes, and I think my one tip is if you get an email from a sponsor in your inbox, that becomes a priority.
Yeah.
Like regardless of internal emails, regardless of speakers, like that's the one that you need to make sure you're answering. Yeah. Whether it's great, thanks for your question. I mean, I've got asked by a sponsor before about the color of a chair, and I literally was like, I have no clue. But I mentioned that. I replied saying, I don't really know. Let me get the answer and I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I think we wouldn't necessarily
acknowledge
it.
Yeah.
Because you're waiting internally. And then to be honest, probably my colleague in ops, if I send her an email saying, what color are the chairs? She's not going to see that as a priority.
But if you say this sponsor has a question, they want to know what's the setup like? What's the color of the chairs? More likely to get an answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that'd be my tip. How have you found like kind of working with sponsors in that sense?
I actually do enjoy working with sponsors. I know a lot of people don't. And I think that's because people can find often commercial content feels very forced, pitching. Obviously, when a sponsor comes onto an event, they've got key marketing, strategies that they're looking to put forward to the audience at your event. And I think the producer's role is really interesting. We've always talked about how we work with all the departments because we do. And there's lots of reasons for the purpose of an event, community building, audience interaction, in person, like in the room, editorial voice and stuff. But you've always got to remember the bottom line, which is make money. That's always the bottom line of an event. So your commercial, like your sponsors are so, so important because at the end of the day, without them, this event wouldn't be happening.
Exactly.
Even if you have, tickets as a revenue stream, still your sponsors are going to make up a huge chunk of, the success and the profit margins of your event. So I think not like you where come in from a commercial aspect, but I think I've always understood the commercial importance of an event. So, and our role in making sure that sponsors are happy.
Yeah. And I think in that, I've also worked sometimes with sponsorship teams on coming on board before they become sponsors with those ones. But I definitely think it's really important as a producer at some point, whether it's before they become sponsors or once they're sponsors, that you really have a conversation with them and you understand essentially why are you sponsoring this event? Yeah. Not in the sense of like, why dare you sponsor this, but more of like understand what are they looking to achieve through your event. And especially if they're going to be on stage, what's the reason behind it? Like, what is the message that they want to be putting out there? Are they want to be seen as thought leaders, or who are the sort of people that they want to be seen next to? And really making sure as well, a lot of times, our agenda is written before that, especially if they're joining a panel. Yeah. And really understanding which panel can they actually fit in. Sometimes we try and squeeze them into panels. I don't know if necessarily it'll work.
Yeah.
So you really need to be quite cautious if you really want to understand, is this panel a right fit for them? And, that comes from really having those conversations.
I think also, like, when we do our research phase and we're understanding what does the audience want to see at our event, we're so valuable at that point because we can then align with the sponsors and their marketing teams of what they want to achieve in terms of like their content and their presence on stage. And they say, okay, well, we wanted maybe this is what we're looking at talking about. And we go, great, this would align really great with these sessions or these tracks, this theme. But we could also say, actually, from our research, we found they're more interested in maybe this aspect rather than talking about this. Is there a way that we can adapt the kind of thinking and aligning what they want to achieve versus with what the audience wants to hear about? And often enough, they are so interested in hearing that feedback.
It's almost like I remember saying once to one of my directors, I am basically a consultant to our sponsors to an extent. Like they're wanting, I really understand my audience. They want to engage with my audience. I consult to them how best to engage with my audience.
And it's got to align with the brand. I always say everything has to come back to the brand because they are getting a spot on our stages at our event, but it needs to flow in the right way that it's not going to stand out like a stark difference amongst the rest of the program. It's like when you get titles and descriptions that are sent by the marketing team and it doesn't align with everything else that's being said, you know, on the program. So, and it just feels completely different. Or sometimes you get things that maybe aren't, if you have a CPD accredited program or something, and then they send just a little bit of blurb, but there's nothing that's going to align with that accreditation as well. So you need to understand what they're going to talk about and then align that back in with the brand voice as well, and possibly CPD accreditation. So that could entirely be rewritten. I've had so many occasions, like email conversations, like threads of just going back and forth on like a description and like a title and going, this is going to look better with the rest of the program and this is going to hit accreditation. And I've literally had them like highlighting individual words and like verbs or something of like that they want to change because like, oh, I don't think we're really going to like cover it in this particular way. And it's like changing something from literally like a describe to an explain or something like as a single word. It's quite funny actually, like the minute details that we go through.
I know. And the thing is, let's be honest, sometimes working with sponsors can be very annoying. You do have some sponsors that are just demand a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've actually had most of the time that the sponsors that have demanded the most from me, then if they're happy at the event, they acknowledge that they were very demanding. Because a lot of times it comes at internally, they've got pressures, right? They have stakeholders who are also trying to be like, justify to me why we've spent this money at this event.
Yeah.
So they're feeling the pressure, and that pressure is put on us, right? So like we're all people at the end of the day, but I do think I think understanding your sponsors is going to be the key to making your life easier. Yeah.
And I think there's what I love to see is there's such a shift in the way of like content that sponsors are putting out. I think a couple of years ago, it would definitely be more looking at like product pitches, new things that they're putting out. And it's now more moved towards thought leadership, customer case studies, and more, I don't know, like really kind of trying to connect with their audience. And it's great to see how that's changed over the years. I've had so many cases where they send me like a description of like their session and it looks like it's a thought leadership kind of thing, but then actually it's a demo or a product pitch. And that's a huge red flag for me because you want it to say what it is on the tin. If you want to pitch and you want to do a demo, that's fine. Just tell us that you want to do that. People hate to be duped.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always try and say to sponsors, if they are going to present, like, you don't like to be sold at, and our audience is not going to like that either. If that's not what they're expecting, you know? So it's also just always trying to I always try and say to sponsors as well, try case studies. Case studies, like, don't talk about what you're doing, show them what you're doing. Yeah. Because if not, people just won't believe what you're saying. Yeah. But also sometimes I've had, like, sponsors come in and their speaker is really given like a story. Like I had someone whose sponsor just came and kind of gave us like a history lesson to an extent of everything that was happening. And then at the end, they fit in like how they fit in, you know, in the present day within this big equation. And everyone found it fascinating because it wasn't just a pitch about their product, which it ended up being at the end. Yeah. They also had a little like, I don't know, history, and it had some interesting content within it.
I mean, I always I think about, I used to do insurance events, and the audience themselves were advisors. So they're obviously working with public that are buying policies from the insurers and making sure that, up to date on their like policy coverage, if they have to put in a claim, and then walking them through that process. And I remember this one time, sponsor case studies are really common. But I remember this one where a sponsor said they brought on the advisor and a customer to talk about a cancer claim, and the customer's perspective of, getting their diagnosis, going through their coverage of, medical costs or income protection, and how the advisor worked with them in that process, and the kind of full working relationship behind between like three parties. And it was really impactful to see, what the advisor role in that sense was, but then the insurer, how they stepped up to make sure that, the customer got their money and talked. It was a great session. And then, but then that's, for the advisors in the room, they're going, okay, as an insurer, that's how they've done it in this particular case study. That sounds great. That's, who I want to be working with. I want to put forward their policies to my customers in the future. That's a great way to do it, rather than going, this is what we can offer. These are our T's and C's. Yeah. Please choose us.
Yeah, I agree. I think I tune off, to be honest, to those kind of presentations. So I'm sure the audience.
I think to them in the audience, like, they're obviously going to be interested in hearing it. But what's going to really sell is the actually seeing, okay, you've delivered on these promises and this is how your customer felt, and my priority is the customer.
Yeah.
So that's what they're going to want to hear. So I think it was just so much more impactful than, 20 slides on this is the coverage, this is how it works. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think, let's be honest, I think sponsors can't hide. I don't like when sponsors try and hide the fact that they're a sponsor, because it's like the audience knows, right, that you sponsored this event, and they know that means you're interested in engaging with them.
Yeah.
So the whole, because there was a bit of a trend for a while, I think I was noticing, where just almost like sponsors want it to seem like they're up on stage in a panel because of merit. And sometimes they are. Sometimes you do get like, you would, that deal with sponsorship, you're like, right, you can get them on board, but they also should be on the panel.
I've done that where I've actually, like, let's say they've booked to do like a session on a keynote theatre, but then I've gone, I actually really want them to be on this panel. Can I please give them a spot? And sometimes you've got to fight for that, because they should pay for it. And I'm like, oh no, but this is more thought leadership. They're doing something really cool. Yeah. They should be on this regardless of payment. And it rarely happens, but it does happen, and you've got to make the case for it.
I mean, I've sometimes had or got speakers on board, and then their company sponsored because they wanted more of the other elements that come from sponsoring an event. So it can happen. Yeah. But I don't know if there's any, I mean, what are you noticing that sponsors want most these days?
Obviously, they're always going to want to find out who was there in the room. Yeah. So that kind of data capture, whether that's from scanning badges on the way in, that's obviously sits out with ops, not with us. But I think there's always some form of a call to action in their presentation, whether that's, I always say the prime spots are right before a break, where they can then go and meet them on a stand. But a way of capturing who's in the room, some kind of sentiment or like engagement data. I think in general, I see more of a trend towards case study and like really getting into like what they're doing for their industry. I'm also seeing more of a trend with a lot of events where they'll have like a tech demo stage. Right, yeah. People don't want to be pitched at without knowing they're being pitched at. And so like where a lot of companies maybe have a software or technology they want to show, get them on a tech demo stage. People are going to be there because they want to see it, rather than if you've put together like, we're going to, put like more of a thought leadership style like description out there, but actually it's a tech demo or a pitch. It's so frustrating. I've been in those sessions like as a producer, sat there thinking, here's how to get more out of your keynote speakers, and thinking it's going to be a discussion based session, and it's actually a platform sale. And it's so frustrating, because I'm at that point, I'm not the one that's going to have the approval to the sign off to buy a new tech. I thought you were going to share insight with me. I
mean, I think what I try to take to sponsors, because I definitely think nowadays you notice it more, it's all about the data, right? I think it's just in general marketing is kind of how it's shifted. It's all about the data. And I think necessarily they've got that kind of mentality. And I try to have them, because I've had conversations with some marketing people in sponsorship teams who they essentially don't care so much about the speaking slot because they've basically sponsored on the basis that they really like the audience that they're going to engage with, right? Yeah. And they're thinking of the stand and the audience. That's basically it. But what I try to say to them is like the speaking slot is what's going to engage the audience. That when you basically get that data and you target them, you've warmed it up through the speaking engagement, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's important, the slot. Because if it was a rubbish slot, if it was not that interesting, it's true. That audience, you can send them an email, you can have the data, but they will not engage with it if they didn't enjoy the content.
Yeah. And you've got a moment on stage where you could have, like, let's say 20 minutes undivided attention to that, however many people in a room, 100 seats in a room. Like, use that time wisely. And people aren't as receptive to being pitched at a lot of the time now as well. People want to engage in conversation and just work with your producer on like what are you trying to achieve with the session? Is it, getting more leads? How can we make sure that, you're putting the best foot forward on stage? And then, we want to deliver good content, regardless if it's editorial or commercial. We want it to be good on stage, and we want to make sponsors happy because at the end of the day, it all works toward the success of an event.
Exactly. So I guess to wrap it up, our tips are, if you ever get a sponsor coming in with an email, priority number one.
Yeah.
And then number two is just, work and engage with that sponsorship. Well, with your sponsors as much as possible.
I think also they're always keen to do something fun.
Yeah, true. That's fair. They always ask. I always find they ask, "What can we do?" They always look for your advice.
Yeah.
So
they always want to put their best foot forward. So you can find often enough actually the marketing teams are really on board with it as well. So they'll always send the decks on time.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
I always find, though, that there are changes on the day. So make sure you've got some memory sticks running around. I do find that there's usually a couple of lines that have changed overnight just beforehand.
Oh, and check the logo that they want for the slides.
Logos, headshots, formatting of job titles. Sometimes LinkedIn isn't the right one, actually, for the speakers. So make sure that those are always checked over as well.
Oh, that was that on working with sponsors.
Yeah, so thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.